Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to sit down and chat to amazing humans about their journeys through life. For these episodes, we're talking about neurodiversity. I'm so happy to introduce Jess to the conversation. Welcome, Jess.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. It's lovely to meet you virtually like this. We're going to learn a little bit about you over the next 20 minutes or so. And I'm so excited to sort of hear your story, as I am with all these stories. So tell us a little bit about your life, Jess. Tell us about your neurodiversity and what's been going on.
Amazing, will do. So yeah, I grew up and live in Brighton and Hove, which some people may know is a pretty diverse and inclusive place to be. Not perfect, but it is pretty good comparatively. So I've always been really kind of supportive and interested in inclusion, especially when I kind of went into work and I realized that it wasn't quite the same. However, I only realized how limited my perception really on inclusion was when I had my first child, because it turns out she's autistic. And it took me on this whole journey to understand about neurodiversity, which was frankly a word I hadn't even heard of before, despite doing work kind of on inclusion. And in understanding more about my daughter and kind of how to be a better parent and communicate with her, it led me to realise that I myself have ADHD, which is obviously something I've had my whole life, but not something I was diagnosed with until last year in my late 30s. Don't like saying that now, but yeah, I am in my late 30s.
Don't worry.
And so it's been an amazing experience for me over the last kind of couple of years, really, was when I started to realise, despite not getting formally diagnosed until last year, and has allowed me to just understand so much more about me, and has enabled me really to be better at what I do, because I don't stress myself out anymore about those things that I find challenging, because I realise that some of that is due to the way my brain is wired, but it's also meant that I am amazing in other areas that I arguably wouldn't be if I didn't have ADHD. So it's been a really positive experience for me, and I join some of the many late diagnosed ADHD people, but specifically women and those assigned female at birth, who are kind of getting identified now in waves, which is a really, really positive thing.
Wow, that's amazing. So that's a fascinating introduction. I really love that, Jess. Thank you for sharing that. And we're going to delve deeper into those thoughts, if that's okay. You made a comment, and I did write it down. You started to realize in the last couple of years that something was different. What was the trigger for that? What changed?
So I think the trigger for looking in or realizing it was definitely researching my daughter and trying to understand more about her.
Yep.
But then I think I realized that actually some of my traits were definitely more obvious than they had been at other times. And for me, that was as a result of having children, actually. And it's not uncommon for women to talk about this who have ADHD.
Yep.
So what can happen, and what happened to me, was that all of that has always been there, but when you're only having to look after yourself or worry about yourself, and everything is selfish in the best way possible, because you're just you, things can be managed quite a lot more easily. Whereas when you have children and you have other people to take care of, you have more demands on your time and on your energy and on your kind of mental capacity. It means that you do find things, well, for me, I could talk about me, I found things much harder, because some of these things that I was able to manage and keep on top of just weren't possible when my capacity was just so stretched. And it exposed, I guess, a lot of the things that I was, I guess, kind of keeping under wraps, and really came to the fore. And that, having my second child, coincided with COVID as well, the beginning of COVID. Right. So we went into lockdown when my second child was 6 months old. So all of that really exacerbated what was already happening for me, but was kind of manageable and under control. And actually, I think prior to that, I was managing to push that out in a really positive way. So there's amazing parts of having ADHD for me. But during that period of when I was on maternity leave and I had 2 small children, we were in lockdown and we had lots of these other pressures, things just became an awful lot harder, and I was less able to make the most of the positive parts of it and some of the challenges kind of came out for me. And what's really interesting is, for me, that really identifies the impact that an environment can have on a neurodivergent person, because I was exactly the same before that and after that, but my environment had changed massively and the demands on me had changed massively. So it meant the outcome went from me from being very positive to quite the mix of positive and not quite so positive, and things that I really did need some support with at that time.
Yeah. Wow, that's a fascinating story, and sort of the reality and all those elements that you've been through. What were you starting to notice though? So you're talking about some of these sort of amazing parts of having ADHD. What is that from your perspective?
The amazing parts for me are, when I look back, I think it's crazy that I didn't realize before. So if I look at my CV, it screams ADHD. I couldn't really stay in a job for a particularly long period of time. I jumped around because I got bored really easily. I always wanted to learn new things, and I wanted to be doing different things. And I remember working alongside people. I worked for a big retailer at one point, and in that big retailer, it wasn't uncommon for people to have been there in the same jobs for like 10, 15. I met someone who'd been there for 25 years.
Right.
Was so happy doing a similar thing that they've been doing this whole time, and I could not understand it because it was so far from what I enjoyed. But the way that then manifested for me was, not only did I get to learn lots and lots of different things, I also then started quite a few different businesses. So I definitely have the kind of entrepreneurial spirit that a lot of ADHD people have, which you may be very familiar with. So a lot of neurodivergent people, so dyslexic people, particularly ADHD people, over-index in entrepreneurship, because we have kind of creative brains. We like learning lots of different things. So we tend to be, or I have tended to be, a sort of expert generalist. So I've learned lots and lots of different things, but not just enough for me to be able to start a business and do my own thing across all of the different areas. And that's been enormously positive for me. And it's also meant I can start different businesses as well. And, you know, I'm also a risk taker, but in I think a positive way. So I think a lot of people sit on business ideas and think, oh, I'm just not going to kind of go for it. But one of my ADHD traits has meant I've just done it, because why would I not want to do it? I really just want to dive in there. I also have hyperfocus, which is what a lot of neurodivergent people have, the ability to really hone in on a topic, become an expert really, really quickly, and also get in the zone where you can kind of do more work than potentially a lot of other people, because your brain just really, really focuses in on that. And I think that's really led me to the point I am now, setting up the current company that I run, called Differing Minds, which does neurodiversity advocacy, because we care so passionately about it. And I certainly don't think I would have been in that position without ADHD.
Wow. And that's, you're obviously making a difference because of your own experiences and your learned experience through what you've been. I do want to take it to another point though in there, which is around the negative aspects of the ADHD, because obviously there's two sides, isn't there? You've got a lot of positives, which are great, and I love what you've got in there, you know, the entrepreneurial piece, the positive risk taking. What about the negative sides? What are they for you?
Yeah, and I think that we have to, one thing I feel really strongly about is the balance between being positive about it, but really accepting that there are challenges for people with ADHD. And I think we've got ourselves to a position in society where we've tried to be so positive about it to remove the negative stereotype, but we don't want to tip the balance and then make it so positive that people don't think that people with ADHD need to be accommodated for and understood better. So for me, I never realised that until I had my ADHD assessment, I didn't realise that not everyone bit their tongue to stop themselves from speaking. I genuinely assumed that's what everyone had. I've done that since I can remember. Right. As soon as someone starts talking, I have something that I know I want to say. And so I learned from a really early age to, you know, put that strategy in place to stop myself from doing it. But if I didn't do that, people would find me quite difficult, I think, sometimes to be around, because my natural tendency is to interrupt. My natural tendency is to kind of talk when someone is speaking. And I have developed strategies, but I do have that sometimes. And I think if I'm in an environment where people don't understand me, sometimes it can come across quite negatively. And then that in turn has a negative impact on you, on your self-esteem, how you feel about yourself. Also, I do have what I like to call dynamic attention. So I hate the term ADHD because obviously it has a double negative in it. I don't think we have a deficit in attention, and I certainly don't think it's a disorder. I think we have very dynamic attention, and that's certainly the case for me. So my attention will move from one thing to another, somewhat out of my control. And so that can be quite difficult sometimes if I'm not in a supportive environment, or I'm not doing something that particularly interests me. It's almost impossible for me to retain my attention. And this is one of the reasons that being diagnosed with ADHD has been really positive for me, because I now understand why.
Yep.
Before, I used to fight with myself and think, why can people just like find the motivation to stay attentive to something, to kind of continue working through something, when I just cannot do it? And I now realize that that's the result of my brain. And so what I do is I allow myself then to have sometimes the beauty of running your own business, where I just don't do things that maybe I should be doing at that point in time, but I know I'll pick up and do it at another time, because I just can't make myself.
Yeah. Wow. Fascinating. I'm really intrigued by your responses and your reactions, your comments, because, you know, the biting the tongue thing, I'm sure a few people were trying it out as they were hearing you talking about it, thinking, oh, okay, I'm not sure. Is it the back of the tongue? Is it the front of the tongue?
Definitely the tip. So I literally just put my tip of my tongue in between my teeth.
Okay.
You can't see it.
So you said you would do that when you were younger, right? So just a random question thrown in here. Would anybody have noticed that? Do you think a parent or somebody would have noticed you doing that?
No, I don't think anyone noticed me doing things like that. I don't think anyone, in fact, a lot of my family are still quite surprised at my ADHD diagnosis, because the stereotype that exists around ADHD, that is typically, and typically not always, but how boys or those assigned male at birth would present. So a lot more on the hyperactive side. So kind of fidgety, running around in the playground, can be quite disruptive, things like that. I didn't present like that at all. I'm much more kind of daydreamy, a lot of the inattention in my own head. And so visibly, you don't see a lot of what's happening inside my brain. And also I achieved at school, and I enjoyed school. So I think a lot of people even now think, I don't understand how I have a maths degree. Even the psychiatrist who diagnosed me said, it's really unusual. You have a maths degree. How did you do that? I said, well, I really liked it. I really like maths. And when I like something, I can pay enormous attention to it. But I wouldn't have been able to get a degree in anything that required me to do any writing. That's why one of the reasons I chose maths, because it was all exams, no dissertation. I didn't have to write anything down after I was 16 and passed my English GCSE, because I just don't think I could do that. So my teachers, I know, would be surprised if they knew I had ADHD now, and certainly no one mentioned anything like this to me at the time.
It's well, incredible that you got through all of that, and that you used your brain in a totally different way than, you know, how academically a lot of people would see your abilities, or whatever they're trying to determine right through school systems. So you're now in a business. When did you start your business?
2021.
Oh wow, okay, so it's sort of right in line with the whole neurodiversity ADHD.
I have to tell this story because
please do.
One of the most ADHD things I think I've ever done. So I talked about the COVID lockdown, and I had 2 small children at home with me, and I couldn't cope with it. It was very, very hard. But when the children went back to nursery, I decided that I wanted to do something new. So I was still working in another job, but I went down to part-time hours, and I decided to apply to do a master's in sustainable development, because I decided I wanted to change the world, and I was really into the environment. And it was a 2-year course, and 8 months into that, I completely burned out. It was going really well, and I really enjoyed it, and, you know, everything was seemingly on paper on track. But I said I needed to take a break, and I was able to do that in the course. So I took a break in May. Sorry, I took a break in May 2021, and I thought, okay, I'm going to just give myself a bit of time to think about, at the time, what I really want to focus on in this master's, because sustainability is so broad. I thought, I'm going to have a topic, and I'm going to focus in on it, and I'm going to become the expert on that. And then 2 weeks later, I went for a night away with my partner, because to try and ease the stress. And on that night away, we came up with the idea for Differing Minds, and we arrived back from that 24 hours away with a logo, with a name for the company, and a business plan, because I cannot rest. And so rather than go back to my master's, we launched Differing Minds, and I've never been back to my master's. And so I've decided to formally quit that now and just take the smaller qualification that I qualify for, And I'm very pleased with the decision, but it just shows how my brain works and how kind of almost up and down it is and spontaneous.
It's fascinating. I'm listening to you telling this story, and I'm thinking of similarities with some things that I've experienced in my life sometimes. And I don't have a formal diagnosis of ADHD, as I am very open, and I don't want to walk around with that, as a thought that somebody thinks that I'm sort of using or saying that I do. But it's fascinating. I can understand that hyperactivity, that hyper focus, and What about when you're feeling low though? How does that sort of come across? Do you just disappear? How do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, when I do, the energy almost just completely drains from my body, and I just can't function, and I can't do any of the things that I would want to do. And interestingly, some of the things that tip me over the edge are what most people would deem really, really simple things. So simple tasks that I find virtually impossible are things like booking appointments, managing my own diary, buying presents for kids' birthday parties, things like that are sort of, for me, I just can't do them. And one of the positives for me of having an ADHD diagnosis is actually that my partner now understands me an awful lot better, and we're able to kind of divide up the household tasks in relation to what I really can't. And so now he takes control of a lot of that kind of stuff. So he'll book appointments for me and make sure I know where I need to be at certain times. He'll buy all of the presents for children's birthday parties. And he can't understand why I find that so hard, but he accepts that I do, because for him, they're really easy things to do. And it doesn't make sense. And I know it doesn't make sense to people, but I just physically can't make myself. And if I try and push through that and I try and do that, it drains me so much of energy that I can't do some of the other things that normally I'd find really easy, like running a business and doing some of the sort of bigger things that people would deem, for the majority of the population. When I get to a point where I'm totally drained, I really need to almost remove every demand from me to be able to recover. And one of the things that I love doing is exercise is really helpful for me. And also sea swimming, I absolutely love. That can really, really help me. But often it's just a chance to kind of recognize that that's how you're feeling. One of the really important things is to know, not just when it's coming, but when you've hit it, and actually think, I can't keep pushing through this anymore. I'm going to have to take some time to look after myself.
Brilliant. And so just touching then, we've got a few minutes left, but touching on how you manage your ADHD now that you're aware of it, and you talked a little bit about sea swimming in there and exercise. So, let's talk just about sort of, obviously there's medication for ADHD, there's holistic solutions. What's your position with that?
Yeah, so my view is very much around the holistic approach. I think we need to consider everything for one person and work out what's best for that particular person. There's no universal approach that's going to work for everybody. So medication is one part of it, and I'm quite open about how at the moment I'm not taking medication. I don't feel the need for it personally, but I know many, many people for which medication is life-changing in a very positive way, life-saving for some people. So it's definitely something I think everyone should at least consider and understand the pros and cons. Diet plays a huge part. So if I'm eating well, there is a huge link between the brain and the gut, and it can have really, really positive impact. Things like drinking alcohol. I do drink, but I do try to do it in moderation for a number of reasons. But I know my ADHD is worse if I'm drinking more than usual. Like I mentioned around exercise, cold water therapy, so helpful for me and really helped reset my mind. So for me, bringing all those things together and kind of coming up with my own plan is what works. And that's what I think everybody should do. So consider all of the different approaches. And that's not even an exhaustive list. For some people, there will be lots of other things that will be really helpful. But finding what works for you can be totally life-changing.
Yeah, and I think there's also parallels with neurotypical people as well, in that whole
100%.
I think we can all learn from each other a better way. And sometimes with that focus being, okay, how do I maintain and manage myself when I'm starting to feel up, down, or whatever it might be? Those variables are for everybody, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And along that line, I think one of the really important things is to surround yourself with people that understand you and can support you. So, I have really good now close friends who really get what I can and can't do. And and support me with that. And also I've built a team around me at Differing Minds as well, who, you know, I talk a lot about creating exceptional teams, not exceptional individuals, because it's a waste of people's energy really to push through things that are not about pushing you out of your comfort zone. But if there are things that you can't do as a result of the way your brain is wired, it's almost wasted energy for you and society to push through that, when you could just work with somebody who can do that and enjoys doing that as well. And so you come together and you create an exceptional team, rather than both of you trying to be exceptional and good at the same things in their own right.
Amazing. Well, I love that. And I know within my team, it's always, you know, I shouldn't say my team, the team that I'm in, you know, it's all about using and helping support each other, and using the service, you know, the skills that we all have, and the abilities that we all have. So I absolutely love that. I embrace that. We are right at the end, Jess. I'm so sorry. You know, this is
Not
just
at all.
incredible. And I've really loved listening to you explaining and, you know, giving your perspective. As I always do, I'm going to give the moment back to you, just to say your final thoughts, anything you want to share with people out there. But just for me, just to say a huge thank you for participating in this. It's been lovely to get to know a little bit about you. But final thoughts from you?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I mean, my final thoughts really are what I say to everybody, is that if you have a negative perception of ADHD, look into it a little bit more. Try and encourage it, kind of educate yourself about what ADHD can really be like, and accept that there are real challenges, but there are amazing strengths and amazing positives of ADHD. And it's not something that we want to kind of shy away from and not talk about. We should talk about it openly and embrace the fact that all of our brains are different.
Beautiful. I love that. Yes, absolutely agree. And we are all different and unique. And these stories and these conversations for me are so much about just giving people a different perspective. So Jess, once again, thank you so much. It's been lovely chatting to you. I wish you all the very best of luck. Good luck with Differing Minds. I know it's going to be a real success, because this is such an important conversation as well. So all the best. Look after yourself.
Thanks,
Jess.
Thank you.